Hello once again, and welcome back to Herd Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botzer. Today, it gives me great delight to welcome back on Mr. Godfrey Bloom. Godfrey is really a man for all seasons, and it's unfair to say he's a political expert, a financial expert, a great raconteur, has a fantastic sense of humour. He's one of those people that we're blessed to have in this country for his insight into a plethora of matters. He probably has the best website out there as a comprehensive go-to for so many subjects that we'll touch on later. And we always leave the links to this great man's work. But without further ado, may I say, Godfrey, how are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. And what a pleasure to be invited back, Mark. Good to see you.
Great to see you too. And we always keep track of what you're doing and saying on your Twitter site, on your website. But there is so much to cover today. But the first thing that we want to put to you is Keir Starmer. Now, we haven't spoken since Keir Starmer has now, as we speak today, just over 2 months, although it seems a lot longer for many of us, that he's been Prime Minister of this country. Can I get an overview of Keir Starmer and Labour's governance of this country so far?
Well, many years ago, I spent some time in East Germany. I'm going back to the late 60s and early 1970s. And I got quite used to the concept of, as it were, self-censorship. What you could do, what you couldn't do, what you could say, what you couldn't say, because the Stasi, the government police, secret police, had almost plenipotentiary power there. It was a fascinating situation with that society, and I never, for the life of me, ever thought I'd be up against this in this country. And it's easy to just place this at Starmer's door, but it's not as simple as that. This has been going this way for some time. This has been going this way for decades. Now, the Conservative Party have clicked it up one small notch at a time. Starmer's just spun the wheel. He's got in and he's spun the wheel. In all fairness, as Peter Hitchens, he's not a big mate of mine, to be frank, but he did say, you ain't seen nothing until you see this guy. So we're moving into a form of East German pre-collapse of the Soviet Union, this sort of situation in this country. And it seems to get worse every day. And moreover, what is interesting, he doesn't seem to care about hiding it. He makes no effort to hide it. He makes no effort to hide the fact that the police have been totally politicized, quite against our constitution and our history. Again, didn't just start with Keir Starmer. This has been going that direction for some time. And he's just saying, look, why are we pussyfooting about? Why don't we just get on with it? So we're dealing with a very, very fascinating situation here. The prisons are opening. He's letting people out of prison who really should be in there. He's putting people in prison who shouldn't be really put in prison. And the whole situation is fantastic. And of course, we've discussed this before, Mark. What is quite fascinating is that we no longer have a free press. It is a government-sponsored or corporate-sponsored or WEF-sponsored press. So he's not being called out. The state broadcasting, BBC, Sky, Channel 4, all these people are just turning a blind eye. So we don't have investigative journalism anymore. There are one or two, but they're not in the mainstream. They're in channels like yours and mine and Sonia Poulton's and people like that. But we still are sadly in a situation where 80% of the population believe what they see on the BBC. And of course, so are the institutions. Dissent is not allowed. The GMC now is striking off doctors who have tried to expose the great COVID fraud and the great vaccine fraud, or not vaccines really, the jab. People are trying to come out, are being silenced and losing their license to actually practice. Dr. Sam White was the most recent one struck off. And I expect the other one who's always in the mainstream media, and he's going to be struck off too. I've gone blank on his name. Down in Cornwall. So that dissent is not allowed. Dissent is not allowed on any subject. And I think this is the most dangerous thing, bearing in mind for those historians who are watching the channel. We knew that Voltaire fled to Great Britain on the basis that he felt he could say, what he wanted to say. He could give a view, a balanced view in his view, without actually being banged up. And we've now got something like, if you want to go before Voltaire, to the Spanish Inquisition. We live in fear. I actually am concerned now about what I say, and we get back to self-censorship, because a moronic policeman will bang on the door wearing a political hat and ask me what I'm thinking. And it was Humberside up here that we found that when the police wanted to know what somebody was thinking. I've had him bang on the door here too for a tweet that I made, totally innocuous tweet, and he wanted me to come down for an interview at the station. I told him to bugger off, and my brief wrote to him and told him to bugger off in spades, and I never heard any more about it. But I'm in an upper echelon of income. I'm experienced. I'm an old geezer now, as anybody watching this can see. I'm 75. I can't be bullied by these people. And if they try and get me to plead guilty on a fake trumped up charge, of course, I'll take them to the court, and I'll get a damn good KC if I don't run my own defense. So I'm probably better than most KCs. So don't try that one with me. But, it's something that we do live in. We are concerned, and I shouldn't be concerned in a free society. And I am concerned. I'm as concerned now as I was when I was briefly in East Germany under the Stasi regime. That must be wrong for a free-born Englishman and Scotsman.
Well said. And there's nothing there to really pick apart for us. But the point that you made about the mainstream media, it's out in the news today that the majority of people now are getting their information from social media. I think it's something like 70%. And of the under 30s, that goes up to 88% of people are turning to social media. But you're quite right to point out that there is no pushback or scrutiny whatsoever for these measures that have been coming down the line for many, many years. Now, people like Peter Wright have written about this in the expose of the Harold Wilson government being booted out of office, for the want of a better term. But do you think that Starmer and the deep state, the civil service, are emboldened because there is no opposition in Parliament, especially from the Conservative Party?
Well, the Conservative Party is a lost cause. They've been a lost cause now probably since the late 1980s, in my view. I mean, they're close to a Blairite administration as you could possibly get. There isn't a single real Conservative on their benches at all. Some are slightly less left-wing than others. That's as far as it gets. So we do have this problem. One of the mainstays of our protection, people like you and me and the viewers today, the mainstream of our protection is our constitution, and people think we don't have a constitution because it's not written in one document like the American. That's people generally speaking without the benefit of a traditional education, which of course is most people these days quite deliberately. So the principles of English law, all these things that have built and manifested their time since Magna Carta, all these things that have gone forward to give the man on the Clapham omnibus freedom of speech. And of course, in the 1930s, the great, it went into the obiter dicta, as it were. What is justice? What is the main principle of English law? And that is what is deemed to be fair by the man on the Clapham omnibus. So it's what you and I. It should be what you and I and our viewers today think is fair. What is fair? Not as some sharp legal guy or some parliamentary subsection like they've got at the moment that say that it's so blanket, they're thinking of making Islamophobia illegal and they can't even define it. Well, that's pretty good when you get in court. If you can't define it, you can bang the guy up, can't you? Because it is by definition not definable. So the protection. But the protection of that constitution is just the same in the United States, of course, with their written constitution. It just shows it doesn't make much difference whether it's by implication in various ways like the 1688 Toleration Act and so on and so forth. These acts. It's the same in America. There is no free press. And so consequently, people aren't, the bad guys aren't being called out that you can't do this. You know, you have a perfectly right to free speech. You have a right to free speech even under the rather bizarre European Court of Human Rights. And of course, if you read that carefully, it should be a total protection for the man on the clap of omnibus, free speech, even if he needed it, which he doesn't. But of course, if you drill down, and you'll find that it's being thrown out as a defence by people who quote whatever subsection 6. By the way, you have the freedom of speech, you have the right to do this, you have the right to do that. It's a wonderful document, except the caveat that says, but if the government doesn't like what you say, you're buggered. So you've got the freedom of speech as long as the government are okay with it. That's not freedom of speech, of course, and that's coming out more and more now. So the European Court of Human Rights defence, which should work, doesn't work. Our own constitution should work, and our only protection is the free press and investigative journalism, which has completely and totally disappeared, except from social media. And by goodness me, I don't know that that's going to last very long. I think they'll be clamping down on that.
Well, they are already. They're calling en masse for Elon Musk and Twitter to be closed down. They've put out an arrest for him in Brazil. So that the culling of any voices of opposition, as you're correctly pointing out, there are similarities to the Stasi, the politicization of the police force, the gulags with the emptying of the prisons to make way for those voices opposing the view and the ideology. We even think back to possibly the Reichstag, and where that was used as a catalyst to arrest a few hundred people, but it ended up over 100,000 people in 1930s Germany. So there are so many similarities. You're a great historian, Godfrey. As you've just pointed it out yourself, there are so many similarities to the playbook, but the pace at that it's going now may well be emboldened by the British public's reaction to the COVID era and the mandates and diktats that were put on them. Do you think that plays a role into how much and how far they're willing to push us?
Yes, indeed. And Graham Brady, I think it was, made the point in the House of Commons 3 years ago from the backbenchers. And I've been, blogging on this since that time. And my website carries quite a lot of detail on this matter. What Graham Brady said was that the governments, not just the British government, governments generally are watching very closely to see what they can get away with. And we live in a situation where the government could stop you inviting grandma to Christmas lunch. They could stop you visiting grandpa who was dying in hospital, and they had to sort of wave at you through a window at best. Unbelievable. I would argue even the bloody Stasi wouldn't have dared do that.
Yeah.
Even the Stasi wouldn't have dared do that. And I stood there stunned because I never believed that we would put up with it. Incidentally, I didn't put up with it. My family didn't put up with it. We took no bloody notice of it at all. We got on with our lives. And if I wanted 10 people to a dinner party, I bloody well had 10 people to a dinner party. You don't mess with me with that kind of shit. And so I took no notice. And if we'd all done that, we'd be a freer society than we are now. But we let them do it. We dropped our trousers and we bent over and we took it. That's what we did. And of course, now they think they can get away with absolutely anything. But, and here's the but, one of the good things about Keir Starmer doing it so fast and so obviously and so without apology is that now even the thicko British electorate are beginning to notice what's happening to them. They're having their arse felt. And so now the man on the Clapham omnibus is actually going, bloody hell, what's this all about? The only people, I think I've made this point on your show before, Mark.
Yeah.
The only people who haven't woken up are the English middle class. The English middle class are without doubt the most stupid group of people on the face of this planet. Now, the artisan class, if I go to my local boozer, as I was on Sunday, much to my headache the next morning, was a 10-pinter. everybody there is a Sparky or a Chippy or a Builder or whatever it is. You know, it's a very blokey pub. My wife said it's very blokey, which is why she probably quite likes it and always comes with me. You might find two women in there, but anyway, it's a damn good pub, artisan's pub, Yorkshire pub with that lovely Yorkshire dry.
Champion, lad, champion.
So you can't fool them. You can't fool them. They know exactly what's going on. They know how many beans make five because they're at the sharp end of regulation and bits and pieces. You know, small businessmen, sole proprietors. They know. But my friends who used to grace my dinner party table, sadly, who no longer do, Oxford, usually Oxford, my friends, not with one or two very noble exceptions, let me say. Oxford, I don't know what happens at Oxford University. I think you need a lobotomy before you can actually start your course. They are so naive and so stupid, it's unbelievable, because, you know, you could set their trousers on fire and they wouldn't know what bloody hell was going on. But, of course, the really clever ones are in the civil service. And they're the ones doing it. Now, they're the clever, evil sods. You know, we've seen them over hundreds of years, of Balliol College in particular. But you can, you know, you could look them all up. The likes of Boris Johnson and all these people, all Oxford, David Cameron, you know, with their fancy drinking jackets and all that kind of thing.
The Bullingdon Club. The Bullingdon Club.
The Bullingdon Club.
Yes.
Thick in some ways, but cunning like a fox. Now, your fox, and I've chased many a fox. Whoopsie daisy, has lost me a few. I can tell you that the fox isn't an intellectual, but he takes a bit of catching. He takes a bit of catching because he's cunning. He's a cunning sod. And so these Oxford people that get to the top of the greasy pole are cunning sods. And that's the problem. Now, if you've got a thick middle class, which we do have, those, and of course, great swathes of them work in the public sector. 6 million of them are in the public sector. I mean, that's 6 million Keir Starmer votes, isn't it? What's the first thing he did? Then he came in, he gave them all a pay rise. He's not stupid, is Keir Starmer. You know, he doesn't care about pensioners because he said that probably they don't vote Labour anyway. So pensioners, we can steal that from and do that to them, cull them. But what he'd really like to do is do what Stalin did with small farmers. He'd like to really just starve them to death. That's his goal, because they're useless mouths. Let's get back to the WEF. World Economic Forum. They're useless mouths, old age pensioners. It doesn't matter what they've contributed over the years. They're useless mouths. And if they die, 4,000, Keir Starmer's own words, his own party's words, if 4,000 die of cold this year, he'll go, good. That got rid of 4,000 people who are just sponging off the state, in his view. So even his own backbenchers are horrified. I don't think people became Labour MPs in order to cut the winter allowance, energy allowance, because energy is so expensive because of their own policies and the previous Conservative. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be expensive. And this is the crazy bit about it. So he's brought this on himself. So he's an evil bugger.
It's well said to all that. But you mentioned the winter fuel payment cutting and culling. Now, there's so much evidence and so much material of Starmer saying and promising, almost like a cast iron guarantee, that he would not touch that. And it seems to have backfired in his face massively. Even your old friend, Laura Cheeseburger of the BBC, she had them on the ropes when she's quizzing them over these moves. And it seems to have galvanized the people in some way that we maybe have not seen for many years. Perhaps even since the poll tax revolt that saw off Mrs. Thatcher.
Isn't it fascinating? I mean, these fellows, I mean, I was in politics long enough to know that all these characters have people behind them telling them to do this, not to do that. That's bad politics. This is good politics. Don't do that. Don't do that. Blah, de, blah. What was their reaction, these people, you know, the Alistair Campbells of this world and other evil sods, when he said, I'm going to cut the winter fuel allowance for all his pension? Didn't they go, you know, why would you do that? It's about £1.5 billion. And in the same week, he announced that we're going to have £10 billion go to Africa to stop the sun shining. For climate change. I mean, the political ineptitude of this. I mean, if we had another election tomorrow, everybody would go back to the bloody useless Conservative Party.
Correct.
So I don't understand what the game plan is, or perhaps he really, really doesn't care. But why would you risk all that political capital to save 1.5 billion when you're getting rid of 10 billion to Africa, which everybody knows is stupid and ridiculous, and another just under £1 billion a month in unaudited foreign aid? I mean, there's 22 billion you could save off the bottom line just like that, and you could give pensioners. You could bring pensions forward for those ladies who diddled out of their pensions, paid tax all their lives. You could actually do something, and not that the National Health needs money; it's got too much money. That's the problem. The National Health Service, you could actually do so. We could actually see a GP instead of a diversity counsellor. You know what we actually want are doctors and nurses. Please, thank you very much. Not the comedians that they always seem to employ. En masse. 600,000 people in the National Health Service have no medical qualification of any sort. They're not doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, radiographers, anybody. Where does the bloody money go?
Well, Godfrey, that's right. And we're looking at state spending now as a percentage of GDP, getting up to 50%. I think at the last, the OBR announced it was 48%. Now, to put that into context, during the Thatcher years, we were about 30% of GDP spent on state spend. But as you correctly said, just a fraction of the money that goes to overseas aid, Africans to stop the sun shining, 5 billion guaranteed year on year to the the operations in Ukraine. It goes on and on and on. So it is almost like a suicidal move by a man who's either clueless, drunk on power, or just doesn't give a flying Ferrari for what the public think.
It does seem that way. He just doesn't care. And if you think about it, that's a little bit sinister. If he cares so little, or is he so short-sighted that he doesn't understand that the next election will come round eventually? Or does he think it doesn't matter because in 5 years' time he will have continued Sunak's work? So he's sponsored, of course, Starmer by BlackRock, and his predecessor was sponsored by Goldman Sachs. This is all about corporatism. This is about, people say, oh, it's left wing, it's right wing, it's fascism, it's communism. This is corporatism of the worst conceivable kind, mixed up with a little bit of Malthusian ideology, like there are too many people on the planet, and so we have to get rid of them, starting with British old age pensioners. Let's get rid of everybody. Of course, as I said before, Mark, they never mean them, do they? They don't mean them and their families. I mean, the king hasn't told any of his extended family to stop having children, has he? He's really worried about too many children. He's not worried about him. He's not worried about him. And he's, what is it? I don't know, 9 palaces and great country houses and all the rest of it, and his Bentleys, and he's now his new personal jet. He's taking the piss. And I'm a monarchist. I've been a monarchist all my life. I hold the Queen's Commission. But I look at this comedian and I go, what's his game? Does he really think we're all utterly stupid? Or we are so deeply monarchists in this country that there's nothing he can conceivably do to stop that.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, Godfrey, but the king took an oath to be neutral, didn't he? But it hasn't stopped him going on about climate change, how we have to do more for migrants because they're not getting the accommodation and the welfare that we're providing for them, despite us costing us maybe 5 billion every year to house, clothe, feed and medicate these people. Why hasn't the king taken it upon himself to jump in to protect the elderly?
Well, you would think, and of course a lot of people don't fully understand the constitutional role of the monarch and the coronation oath, which is no longer taught about in schools and so on. So they say, oh, well, the king can't do it. He can't do that. He's a constitutional monarch in a parliamentary democracy. Yes, he can. He doesn't have to put his signature on the bottom. Any more, I have to say, than Her Majesty put her signature to the accession to the European Union, which was directly opposed to her own coronation oath. So I'm afraid you cannot trust the House of Windsor. No. Now, you probably want the Stuarts back. But I mean...
yes. Lovely people.
Well,
they're not German, Godfrey. They're not
Yeah,
Germans. We have Germans
I
running the
know.
show.
They're Well, one might make a case for the Plantagenets. I don't know, but I'm still, broadly speaking, in favour of constitutional monarchy because it
Indeed.
works if it's done right. If
Indeed.
it's done right, it works.
Like Brexit.
But done the way that we're doing at the moment, the
Mm.
complete abrogation of the king's responsibility to his subjects,
Mm.
that's not allowed. That's again his coronation oath. And if anybody hasn't read his coronation oath,
Mm.
it's not that long. You can Google it up, read it by all means, and just see just where the flaws are.
Indeed, sir. Now, that's the political side taken care of. Now we're coming to something a little bit more hopeful, shall we say. We're talking about finance. This is another one of your many areas of expertise. You're an award-winning fund manager. And anyone that doesn't know, you've got probably the best comprehensive website in Europe, let's say, when it comes to investment. There are guidelines there. We're not giving anybody any advice. Let's just make that clear. But you will leave the evidence for people to read themselves and come to their own conclusions. We've got Rachel Reeves's first. We've got her first budget in October, 23rd of October. We've heard so many stories of how we're looking at corporation tax rocketing up, council tax rocketing up. What can people do before that as a pre-budget move with their finances?
Well, the problem we have with Rachel Reeves is that she is a Keynesian economist, sometimes called, it's been morphed into MMT now, modern monetary theory. But broadly speaking, she believes that tax is beneficial, that government spending puts money into an economy. So she's coming from the wrong direction to start with. What she doesn't understand and what she needs to do is actually perhaps read the history of Hong Kong post-war under John Cooperthwaite and understand that if you want to grow an economy, you free the economy up. You get rid of all the rules and regulations, petty rules and regulations, all the rest of it, and you reduce to as close to zero taxation as you possibly can. And you understand that every single damn thing isn't the responsibility of government. She might look at the biography of Lord Salisbury. I've mentioned this on your show before, who was a true conservative, and I don't think we've had a real one since, to be frank. So there's Lord Salisbury, and perhaps you might like to go recently to Eberhard, who was the financial chancellor of the German Republic post-war, who said, we've tried all this fashion, we've tried National Socialism, we've tried all this government control, it doesn't work. I'm going to step back and let the German people get on with their lives and do what they want. And that's what they did. And that's where we saw Germany, who lost the war. Germany was devastated, overtake us, their economy overtake us, for the simple reason they left the economy alone. Now, we didn't. We had Clement Attlee and we had rampant socialism in ours. Of course, we were overtaken in no time by the people who lost the war, the Japanese and the Germans and everybody else. That was an absolute disaster. So what people don't understand is that taxation is bad, government spending is bad, borrowing is bad, printing money is bad. It leads to inflation. And the only reason we haven't had inflation much earlier than this is because inflation went into asset prices. Asset prices went up, but it didn't reach Main Street, as they call it in America, or the High Street. Well, it's reaching it now. And we know they fiddle the books and they try to say, oh, it's only 2.5% in the last year. Oh, bless them, really. They really do think we're stupid, don't they? And it's the same in America. And it was much more than that before. And it goes up in leaps and bounds. It doesn't, follow a trajectory. Inflation, you get rampant inflation for a bit, then it stops, and then it starts again. It only stops if you stop government spending, reduce government spending, and reduce taxation and regulation. That's when your economy starts to recover. And it's as sure as me, God made little green apples. I mean, it's ridiculous. You do not need a doctorate in economics from Cambridge University to understand this. This is what used to be O-level economics. And now you're not allowed to talk about this. It's terrible. Government spending is good. As if and only even Winston Churchill, who was a hopeless economist, but even he knew Even he knew when he said taxation, a country trying to dig itself out of a hole with extra taxation is like standing in a bucket and trying to lift yourself up by the handle. You know, it ain't going to happen. Now, this young lady was very junior at the Bank of England, Rachel Reeves. I'm sure she's a very nice lady. I don't know her particularly well. I have shared a panel with her once some years ago. I think it was in Leeds. Bless her. It's a bit like one of those discussions you have with young undergraduates or sixth formers. You know, they're full of idealism and they've got plenty to say, but they've got no real experience or understanding of how things work at all. Bless them. Now, that's all right if you're a fresh-faced youngster at Cambridge. That's okay. It's rather endearing, in point of fact. But it's bloody disastrous in the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And she's not alone. Most of the previous Chancellor, you go back to Lawson, every Chancellor of the Exchequer we've had, right the way back to Lawson, really hasn't understood economics at all. They just don't get it, which is why we're in the shit we're in. Otherwise, with a very highly controlled economy that we've had in this country since the days of Thatcher, if you will, it's the reason we're now £3 trillion in debt. The tax level is the highest it's been since the war, in my lifetime. And so the whole country is going to rat shit. It's because our politicians don't know how to run an economy. I've often said that what we need as Chancellor of the Exchequer is an old-fashioned working-class Yorkshire housewife who knows how to balance her books.
Sure. That's
what we want. We want somebody in number 11 Downing Street who actually understands you cannot continually spend more than you bring in. You can't do it. Go back to Micawber and Dickens, of course, couldn't you? That's famous.
Indeed. I mean, these old sayings are great. You know, neither a borrower or a lender be. Don't have it if you don't. You know, don't spend it if you don't have it. These old sayings that grandmama or granny, as we say in Scotland, with kept them going, and it kept food on the table. But when we're looking at investments as a nation, we're spenders. We're not savers. But looking to people who now are getting in touch with Herd Immunity News and myself and saying they're downsizing their properties to the bare minimum in order that they can take the residuals and invest in things like gold and silver. What do you think to those people that are saying that sort of thing?
Well, I think they're reading the runes. I think they know what's coming down the track. And I sometimes ponder, I know people might not think that's because I'm an arrogant little sod, but I do ponder sometimes and wonder, am I right about this? Am I missing something here? Is there some big piece of the jigsaw that I'm just not getting? But I don't think there is. You cannot, let's say the national debt now is going up by £350 million a day. It's absurd to imagine that you can go on like that. And they come in and Rachel Reeves was saying, oh, well, you know, there's a black hole. Well, firstly, of course, there's been a black hole for years, and to pretend they didn't know about it is disingenuous, to say the least. She knew exactly where it was. And then, of course, then to try and balance it by taking it away from pensioners and sending it all abroad, I mean, which we covered just earlier, is absolutely crazy. So what can people do? What's the doing thing? And I'm on your Countryman's show in a couple of days.
Yes, Jim Ferguson and you are going to do a little stream experience when it comes to buying a sovereign.
So I'm looking forward to doing that, because everybody thinks, oh, well, you know, the thing is with Bloom is that, you know, it's all very well if you're a very rich man, he'll tell you how to get richer, you know, which I will. But I'm very big on the reason I do this, which is to say my site is non-profit making. There's no subscriptions. I don't take any dough for anything. So it's I take advertising, people advertising on my website. That's fine, but I don't take anything else, and it's totally independent. Exactly. So the point that I'm making really is this is really pro bono publico, because I always felt is because our electorate has been betrayed, or the ordinary working man has been betrayed, in my view. And if I can do anything to help them, that's what I want to do. And what can he do? Let's take your example of the guy who downsizes his house.
Yeah.
And I think the opportunity for doing that, the window to do that, will be closed by Easter, in my view. when you can't sell you can't sell any kind of house. And we saw that, if you remember, in 1973 and 1989. You couldn't shift the house. People always think, oh, well, property, and I can always sell my house. You can't. You can't. You're going to look up the figures in 73 and 74 and 89. You bloody well can't. So you might be able to adjust at the moment. I think it's already dying by the number of for sale signs I see starting to sprout. And that's always a giveaway when everybody's starting to, do this. But let's say that guy does it. Let's say he makes 50 grand out of downsizing by the time he's paid his bills and all the rest of it. And he's living in a middle ranking sort of outside London. London's a different game. But, so let's say he's got 50 grand back in his pocket. Yeah. Well, I would argue gold coinage. And the reason I argue gold coinage is because, A, it's not an investment. It's not an investment per se. It's a store of wealth. I've said it before. It's a store of wealth. And what I tell undergraduates when I'm lecturing at universities is a sovereign, the old gold sovereign, in 1900, I have one in 1900, I think 1905, that would buy bed and breakfast. That would buy in a decent Berlin, London, Parisian hotel. That's what it will buy. It's what it bought then. It will buy that today because the sovereign's worth about 450 quid. It will buy that in 100 years' time. History tells you this. 2,000 plus years of these gold coins being money and 5,000 years as a store of wealth. Because you go back, what did the Egyptians wrap themselves in? It was gold, the gold this and gold that. Okay, it wasn't coinage per se. But so, or silver, you could argue, make a case for silver, but we go down a rabbit hole if we do that. But if it's gold, first of all, it's coin of the realm. So it doesn't carry VAT. It doesn't carry capital gains tax. You could put quite a significant amount of wealth in the tea caddy. If you've got a lot, I've been collecting the stuff for years. So it has to go in a lockup, an independent safe deposit in London.
Like Bricks, for example. Bricks, very well known company. Just for example, there's a name, the Bricks.
Yeah, that's right. But that's quite easy. And if you buy your sovereigns from a reputable dealer, all listed on my website, a reputable dealer, and they're all pretty reputable. Most of them. There are one or two cowboys out there, but they don't go to it. They're not on my website.
There are regulators that they have to be.
They have to, but the Gold Council and so on and so forth. It's not highly regulated, but it's regulated enough to protect the man on the Clapham omnibus. Take delivery. The golden rule is take delivery. You really want it in your hand. You want those gold coins in your hand, and if you've got too many of them, you have to lock them up because you can't risk a burglary. We're in a very low time here, but I still wouldn't risk it in the house, and we're away a lot and so on and so on. So I don't keep it here. Hey, everybody out there, I don't keep it here.
And ditto.
Don't bang on the door.
Ditto.
Yeah. Don't bang on the door or you shoot me or blow my legs over the ground. It's not here.
No, not here, Governor.
And I'm more likely to blow your legs off, mate, if you're listening there, if you're a burglar, than you are mine. But
and you have a very nice sword as well, we believe.
Yes, I've got my regimental sword.
Yes.
I'll skew you. You've probably got a claymore.
Well, you do too, just in case.
So you've got that. And it's hidden. Yes. Okay, if you buy under £10,000, there's no registration to my knowledge. If you buy more than £10,000, the gold bullion dealer is obliged to keep it for government inspection, if that's the case. In 2, 3 or 4 years' time, that will just fall off the log. That won't be there. So that's yours. Can't be taxed because nobody can find it. Nobody can see it. It's in your tea caddy or dug in your back garden. Or whatever you want to do with it, and it will always be worth what it was worth when in spending power. You might make a buck out of it, it might go up, but that's not the game to play. What do you want to do? You've got that 50,000, you've worked hard for that, you've paid a mortgage on that, you've sold your house at £50,000. Let's say you're 60. Just grab it out of the air. 60 years old, there's your 50 grand. It's okay, it's safe, it's in gold, coin of the realm.
Yes.
What won't you get when you're 70 or 75? National health. It will be gone. It's virtually gone now. Yes. I mean, now I need to see a quack about something. Sure. It's private. Yeah. It's a private clinic. I can't get a hold of him because there's overflow in the national health. They're sending them to private clinics and the taxpayers picking up the tab. So when I go now for my stuff, it's full of national health punters. who are being paid for there, which I'm feel quite resentful about because my checkbook's coming out, my credit card's coming out, and these buggers are on the freebie. But never mind, leaving all that aside, it won't be there, people.
Yeah,
it won't be there, especially if you were born here. It won't be here. If you're the taxpayer all his life, you're that man on the Clapham omnibus, it won't be here for you in 15 years' time. Now, I think most people watching your show or watching Jim's show or my channels,
yes,
they know that. They know that.
They do.
So that's the best option. Take sovereigns or half sovereigns, because otherwise you're going to have a coin which is worth 450 quid. Which is rather a lot to do much with. If it's half sovereign, that's good. But sovereigns are good. And if you've got a lot of dough, a Britannia is good because that's a 1 ounce coin.
Exactly.
And when you need the money, people say, "Oh, well, I get morons sometimes coming onto my channel saying, I can't buy the grocery bill with a gold coin." Of course you can't. I know that. What you actually do is you cash in your half sovereign for 200 quid, in whatever currency of the day it is. And you keep that and you spend that on your groceries. And then somebody says you can't eat gold. A moronic statement is that you can't eat gold. Well, of course they can't eat it. I'm not suggesting you can eat. You can buy a bloody decent size of piece of beef with a gold sovereign. All right. So that's what you're after. And there are other things you can do. I personally, I'm slightly more than pessimistic about what's coming down the road. I'm a big, I sat on a committee once with the Duke of Edinburgh. It was quite funny, and I travelled on his flight, the Queen's flight, once. And the stacks in the overhead lockers, there were stacks of Fray Bentos pies.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
He loved the gravy, even though you don't get much meat.
There's no meat, but the gravy is to die for. And when I was a bachelor, one of my sisters worked for Fray Bentos. And she could have as many as she liked. She used to come around the sack. I think I was 19, living in a bed sit. I lived on these buggers. I still love them today. Those days are coming again. It could be sardines. It could be pinks, Canadian salmon.
Corned beef.
Corned beef, excellent. Especially I could drone on all day about what you can do with corned beef.
Yeah.
Corned beef hash.
We'll do that cooking show. We'll let Jim Ferguson do the gold bullion. We'll get Godfrey on with the apron.
And bread pudding.
Yeah,
I've got lots of stuff. Bachelor, I'm still. But as soon as my wife goes away, for any reason, for a few days, she comes back and says, "God, you've gone back to bachelorhood 40 years ago. Look at it. There's Fray Bentos tins. There's corned beef tins. A few empty bottles of whiskey, so on and so forth. It's great fun. Those days are coming back. Those days are coming back. And if they don't come back, and I hope they don't come back, do you know? That's something that a lot of people don't know, as Michael Caine would say. A lot of people. Did you know that tinned sardines, for example, or tinned mackerel, gets better the longer you leave it in the tin? And I had a friend of mine, a wealthy man in Leeds, who used to collect them. He reckoned that they were you need to keep them to be really good 20 years. Sardines, and they're very good. And the French know about these things. There's some shops in France that they will sell you 20 because they're better. It's a bit like wine, or it's a bit like beef or whiskey. Exactly. And now don't ask me why. I couldn't tell you the technicalities. But so, and they will last. And of course they did. If I don't know if you remember, Mark, they dug out some stuff that Captain Scott, they found some Captain Scott's kit when he was in the Arctic, making a complete prat of himself. They found some of his tin Christmas puddings and stuff like that. Totally edible today. So stack up, and you can get a Fray Bentos sponsored. Now, if there's anybody out there, an executive of Fray Bentos, get me on to sponsor. I'll accept money for that. You could get a Fray Bentos steak and kidney pie for £2.50.
And the advert would be, they're smackingly good as you whack over the head a very low rent, low grade leftist hack. I forget his name right now. I think it could be Michael something. Michael Cricket Bat.
That's right, yes. It was quite funny, on that, just on that story, it was quite funny. Somebody said, that's assault and you could have done this and you could have. I said, look. I whacked him. There was no problem because we had a pint later as well. Yes. which a lot of people don't know about. But I used to do a little bit of boxing in the army, and I can tell you, if I'd whacked Michael Crick, it'd have stayed whacked. Whacking him over the head with a brochure, he got off very lightly.
We always talk about it and bring it up because it is one of your great moments. I mean, there's been many of all the speeches and everything, but as far as a little bit of horseplay is concerned, it was a friendly tap over the head, and it really hit a nerve. It hit a nerve with a lot of people. But just to finish up on the financials.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I digress.
Well, I took you down that. As soon as we start talking about Mr. Crick, things go a little bit awry. But companies, organizations that are on your website, such as the Gold Bullion Partners, they are actually getting into the mainstream now. And one of the great gentlemen there, Nicholas Ward, has been speaking with Neil Oliver.
Fabulous interview.
Incredible, that we'll leave the links to. But Neil is like yourself. He's a man for all seasons, is a Renaissance man, and he is saying to people, beware, because this shit is coming down the tunnel apace. You better get ready for the storm, and if you don't, hell mend you.
And I plugged my book for a second here, which is in its second edition now. It's on Amazon. It's easy to get, and it's at cost. It's an aid memoir. It's a wee book. Okay.
Beautiful.
And it's 10 years old. I've updated the graphics, but now the graphics are 2 years out of date and graphics move. But it's not that. The principle of the thing, and it's called the coming crisis, and it's about banking, and it just gives you all the graphs and stuff you need to know. What is money? Most people don't know what is money. How do you define money? What is it? What's it for? How did it come about? In the old days, the Sumerians used to use sticks and stuff, but money really, since the Egyptians, as money has always been the silver drachma or gold coins or silver coins, and that hasn't changed. Nothing's changed. It's all on my website. You can find it all on my website. Yeah. It's all easy peasy there. But it does help because there's a lot of people doing channels and a lot of people doing interviews, and people get bewildered and they go, well, it sounded convincing. That bloke Bloom sounded a bit convincing, but I don't know what to think because I heard something else completely different from somebody else. So as I said, you said earlier, not investment advice. I don't give investment advice. What I do is try and guide people onto the target. It's still, if you find if you like a dealer there, for example, it's GBP, Gold Bullion Partners, or Pure Gold, or Bullion by Post.
There are all other options, of course.
Yes, there are lots of options. Do your own research, and if you're going to be a big investor, and when I say big investor in gold, it doesn't have to be 1 million or 2 million. Sure. I would say, because it's all relative. So if you're an ordinary working Joe and you've got £50,000 worth of gold, that's a big sum to you. It's a big sum anyway, unless you're a multi-millionaire. So then the thing is with the sum, and it's all on the website, so I'm not going to sort of flog anything. But if you can get hold of a guy there, and he will be your account advisor. So you might want to put the toe in the water. You want mine to do a little bit more by Christmas. You want mine to view when is a good time to buy, what is a right coin to buy. So you want to speak to the guy at the trading desk.
Yes.
And you want somebody who's knowledgeable, not just a guy who's a telly-salesman.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not having a pop at anybody, but it's nice if you can speak to somebody like Nick. Nick.
Yep.
Yeah, you get kind of, and you'll get a sensible conversation from the guy. He's not there. He wants you to be a customer of his trading platform in the long term.
Exactly.
He's not interested in flogging. And the other most important thing is, what do they buy back at? This is the key. Everybody goes, oh, I'll get that. And that's tuppence cheaper than that. Or that's, that's not the point. Most bullion dealers will sell you a gold coin at the same price because they get it from the mint. They make a mark on it. That's how they make their money. Now, you don't want to pay a whack when you want to sell it back. The day you come to sell it back, some of these bullion dealers will charge you a 5% discount. So when you've built up your gold portfolio, you might find that when you want to sell it back, you'll whack for 5% of it. Now, you want to find out what they buy back at and what the tradition of buy at, what's their provenance, what's their history of buying back. And the ones that I particularly recommend, make a commitment to buy back at spot or close to spot as can be.
Yeah.
And they can't guarantee it. It's impossible in the gold market or commodity market to do that. But they say, we'll buy that back from at spot unless the whole world has gone mad, you know.
Is it a good time to buy gold?
It's always a good time to buy gold if you're patient. Patience is rewarded with gold. It can stay flat for 3 years. You know, you could buy a sovereign for one of my first sovereigns I bought. I think there was something like 180 quid each.
Wow.
You know, and they stayed at 180 quid for ages and ages. And I thought, well, it didn't matter to me because it was strategic. Your gold holding, your gold coins are for at least 5 years. If you want them back under 5 years, please don't bother because, you know, you might get lucky. But we're not in the get lucky. You know, it's like Clint Eastwood. You know,
I mean, there are forecasts. There are forecasts.
Do you feel lucky?
Exactly. Do you feel lucky, punk? There are forecasts. Not you, sir. Not you. But there are many people saying that silver is going to far overtake gold because of it's so required, it's so essential, it's so necessary for this net zero bullshit. That we won't take you down that rabbit hole today on net zero. It's all on the website.
I'll be happy to come and talk about it again.
Yeah, another time.
But my fingers have been burnt on silver.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm coming back into silver, and we can discuss that another day.
Yes,
I have reasons for that. And silver's good, but you need to know a little bit more about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's wise advice to put a full stop on that there on the gold. And as always, we'll direct people onto your website and all your other works. But all that remains for me to say, Mr. Godfrey Bloom, is thank you very much for appearing on Herd Immunity News once again, sir.
Great privilege and pleasure.
Thank you.